Hi guys, today we are going to start with our solar system paintings. So the first step of this, the first day, we are going to need a piece of paper, nice heavy paper that can hold watercolor. We're going to need a pencil to draw with, and you're going to need your oil pastels. So make sure, let's go ahead, get all of those three things ready, and then we can begin. So the first thing that we're going to do, last time we learned how to draw a sphere. We talked about how shape plus value equals form. So if you create a shape, like let's say a circle, and you add value to it, you shade it, especially around one edge, you're going to get something that looks 3D, that has form. So that circle turns into what looks like a sphere. And we practiced making those spheres last time. So today we are going to put that new skill to use. In our solar system, everything out there, the planets, our star, they are all spheres. And we also talked about light sources. Now, the biggest light source in our solar system is obviously our sun. So let's go ahead and let's get that biggest sphere down on the paper. Our sun is so large that I don't really want to do it in the middle, because if I do it in the middle, it'll take up all the space and all the other planets will have to be super, super tiny. So instead, I'm going to pick a corner of my page, any of the four corners, to draw my sun in. And guys, try to kind of look around too, see what people around you are doing, and let's vary where our sun is placed, because if everybody does their sun, let's say in the upper left-hand corner, that gets a little boring. It starts to look the same. So choose a corner that maybe you don't see a lot of your friends using. So I'm going to start by sketching in just that curve. The rest of the sun goes off the page. It's a whole big sphere, but it goes off the page. So now I need to go ahead and start sketching in my planets. Now when you think about the planets, we've got those inner planets and those outer planets. So what I might do, I might go ahead and really lightly sketch a line about halfway between my sun and the far corner of my page, and I'm going to have this really light line be my asteroid belt in between the inner planets and the outer planets. So now that I know that's about where my planets are going to change from inner to outer, let me start sketching in some planets. I'm going to start with Mercury. Mercury's close to the sun, and obviously this is not to scale. We're trying to fit all the planets in, so Mercury's going to be really close to the sun here. But I'm going to sketch that in. Mercury's pretty small. Next, I want to sketch in Venus. Now, you guys can, if you want to, just do your planets in a straight line, but honestly, it's a little more realistic if you spread them out a bit. Keep in mind, those planets are orbiting the sun, but they're not doing so at exactly the same rate. So I'm going to go ahead and sketch in Venus as well, a little bit farther out than Mercury. Once I've got Venus, next up is Earth, our home. So now, a little bit further out, I'm going to sketch in Earth. And finally, let's get in Mars. Mars is going to be pretty close to this asteroid belt line. So I don't have to draw the individual asteroids. I'm going to color them in a little bit with my oil pastels. So right now, let me go ahead and get Jupiter, my next planet, in. Jupiter is going to be a little bit larger. And if you guys want to make these a little bit oversized, like larger than they would really be, I mean, I'm already doing that, but it's easier to color in larger things. So you can definitely make those planets a little bit larger just so that you can show some more detail. After Jupiter, I've got Saturn. Saturn's a little bit smaller and it has that nice ring. If you're looking at Saturn from above, the ring would be another circle around it. But because I want to look at my solar system from the side, I'm going to add that ring kind of flattened out, like an oval, but even flatter. All right, next up, I'm going to sketch in Uranus and Neptune. So now I know where my planets and my sun are going to be located, so I can add color. Starting with our sun is a yellow dwarf star, so I definitely want to include the color yellow. However, when you're thinking about the sun, You might be thinking of some other colors too. Think of those warm colors. When you think of fire, what are those colors that you think of? If you said orange and red, you would be correct. Now, fire and stars can get even hotter and turn different colors like blue, but because our sun is only hot enough to be a yellow dwarf star, yellow is a good color to use for this. So I started adding a different shade of yellow, and there was some green on this oil pastel. So let me show you guys how you erase with oil pastels. It's kind of icky, but honestly, you just take your nail and you scrape up the color that you don't want. Because oil pastels, they work by creating this like nice layer of oily pigment on your paper. So you can usually just scrape up the color that you don't want and then color back over it. Now, even though my sun is yellow, to just really make it look glowing and warm, as I said earlier, I can add a little bit of red or orange to it, especially if I want to go around that outside edge. That helps make it look fiery. Our sun sometimes ejects, I think it's plasma from its surface, and so if you want to do those like little bits of fire almost coming off it, you can do that too if you would like. Maybe look up on your MacBook or your Chromebook what that looks like. I'm going to make the center of the sun lighter and brighter because typically when you look at photos of the sun, that's kind of how it looks. It has that really hot center. So now that I've colored in my sun, I'm going to start coloring my planets. If you guys would like to research and find out what color some of these planets may be, you can do that. But if you'd also like to use your imagination, I'm okay with that too. So I'm going to start out here with Mercury. And it can be a little bit hard to get a perfect circle with these oil pastels. They're a little bit chunky for this, but just use the edge and make that tiny circular motion with your hand and you'll get something that looks okay. All right, next up is Venus. And I'm looking at a picture of Venus and it does look kind of white and cloudy, but I'm gonna go ahead and add a little green just because I think that would be fun. Next up, the planet that we all know what it looks like. Let's get Earth in here with our blue oceans and our green land. And then Mars, the red planet. Next up is Jupiter, and keep in mind Jupiter has that big storm going on, that big eye of the storm on its surface. And you can also get in some stripes there too. Jupiter's a little bit bigger, so we have room to play around with the color a little more. Oil pastels, as you're probably learning, blend really well. So for example, if you make a stripe in one color and then you color over it with another color, it will really blend almost like paint. So experiment with that today. See how you can create different colors, different textures by blending. Also guys, I am using the really big oil pastel pack. You might not have this many colors, which is totally okay. You can get a lot of these colors by blending your oil pastels together. All right, let's tackle Saturn. and its rings. Okay, so now I've got in all 8 planets. Now I want to start adding other things that I might see in space. And that can include that asteroid belt. So again, along that line that I sketched in really lightly, I can do a bunch of debris, a bunch of space rocks. And apologies to my science teachers if I get anything wrong in this video. This is why you should always do your own research, kids. Well, our solar system only has the one star, our sun, in the center. When you're flying around the solar system, you are going to see stars from different solar systems within our galaxy. So I would go ahead and I would do some stars. Now you don't have to like draw a star with the 5 points because that's going to be really enormous. Instead, what I would suggest, I would take a really pale yellow or a white craypa or oil pastel, and I would dot just some really tiny dots. And it's funny, star patterns, they can be kind of random, but if you can remember any constellations and you would like to show a constellation or two, that's definitely something you can do as well. I'm also okay with you guys adding additional things like maybe a space shuttle, a satellite, things like that. Just check in with me first and we'll talk about it in terms of scale, because sometimes if you have like a really enormous spaceship, it can look kind of funny compared to your planets unless it's really clear that that spaceship is in the foreground. Like we learned about with our landscapes, if something's big like that, it's usually in the foreground, so you have to show that typically by overlapping. And when I use my white oil pastel, it really doesn't show up on the page much at this point. But there is a reason that I'm doing that, which will become clear very soon. All right, so this is where we want to be by the end of class today. You want to have drawn your composition and you want to have colored it in. Now, the very last thing that we are going to do, remember, we were talking about spheres and how value creates that 3D form, that appearance of 3D. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to find my light source, my sun, and then I'm going to find the opposite edge of each planet, because keep in mind, when the light source shines on these planets, it creates a highlight on the edge closest to it. So I can take my light or white oil pastel and do a little highlight on these planets if I want to. Again, you might want to clean off your oil pastel between each one so you're not transferring color. And once I've got my highlight, next I want to do a shadow on each one. Now, instead of just making my shadows like pure black, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the darkest version of the color of each planet. So for Earth, I'm choosing this really dark turquoise to create a shadow. For Mercury, because it is gray, I will use a little bit of black on the edge. And again, I'm just making that like half crescent moon shape, because keep in mind, when we think about day and night, this side of Earth, because it is away from the sun, the light source is not hitting it, it's night there. But the side of Earth that the sun is hitting, it's day. And And again, if you're not quite sure where the shadow should be, draw a line from the light source, the sun, straight toward that object, and the shadow should be on the opposite side. So right now I'm doing my shadow a little low. Honestly, my shadow should be more like on this side, because when I draw a straight line from the sun to Jupiter with my finger, the highlight hits here, which means the shadow would be over here. For Saturn, you can definitely do a shadow on the rings, but I would do it separately. So do you see how I've done my shadow right here on Saturn? Now I'm gonna go in and add the shadow to the rings and maybe make it a little bit farther back, because the sun is still probably hitting this ring here, whereas it's not hitting this part of the planet. All right, guys, and that is where we are going to leave it for today. I've got my solar system image with my light source, my sun, with my planets, and they all have a shadow on the far edge.